back to From This Corner TV. Tonight, I'm Marilyn Dayton, your host, and tonight we're going to talk about a subject that's very near and dear to a lot of our hearts. Just about everyone knows someone with autism, and so we're going to kind of get into the nitty-gritty tonight, because we've got an expert with us the first half, and then on the second half we'll be joined by Autism Speaks. So with us tonight is Meghan Brahm. Did I say it right?
You did, well done.
And she's a board-certified behavior analyst. And let's see, we have more here. I did have more.
I can certainly give it to you
Okay.
if you'd like. So I started my journey in the world of autism back in college. I graduated with my bachelor's here in Connecticut with a degree in psychology and a concentration of psychology of child and adolescents, and a specialization really in applied behavior analysis. And then I went on to get my master's in Connecticut as well, and that is kind of a trifold master's in special education with a specialization in autism spectrum disorders and applied behavior analysis. And currently, I am actually living in Ireland, and I am doing my doctorate there, which is in applied behavior analysis as well. And my research focus is in autism and kind of how behavior analysis and autism fit together, and looking a lot at risk factors for the development of autism and how those risk factors kind of play into developmental milestones and childhood outcomes and those sorts of things. So that's how I landed.
That took half the show.
It's an extensive background.
Well, I'm so glad you're with us, because
I am too. Thank you for having me.
A few things have been changing in the autism and Asperger's syndrome world, and so can you just tell us what it is that you've learned?
Absolutely, I would love to, and we'll be here all night.
Wow, okay.
If I don't learn how to calm down with my sentences a little, I suppose. So I guess most recently in the world of autism, the biggest change that we've seen is the new diagnostic criteria. And so in psychology, what we have is what's called the DSM. It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. This year, we just came out with the 5th edition, and in that edition, the way we diagnose autism has changed. And while it has changed, it's not drastic changes. Really, what we consider the DSM to be is kind of a living document. And the DSM develops as research develops. So it was very appropriate for the diagnostic criteria to change. And so what we see now is the diagnostic criteria is kind of twofold. So what we have are, firstly, impairments in social communication and social interactions. And so what that might look like, and this is just very hypothetical and a very general statement, but what that might look like is maybe an inability to carry on a conversation, an inability to read social cues, an inability to understand language that's being spoken to you. What we kind of hear generally in the world are learners who are verbal and nonverbal. So what that would mean is a person that speaks orally to you and somebody that does not. Maybe somebody who uses communication to sign language to communicate instead. Mm-hmm. And so part of the impairment there would be, if you did have a verbal learner, can they use those verbal skills to be able to interact with you, to be able to talk to you, to be able to carry on a conversation, make friends, those sorts of things. And then kind of the other tier would be, or the second fold, would be the presence of repetitive behaviors or interests. So these are a lot of the more stereotypical things that I think the general population thinks of when you hear autism.
Yeah.
So maybe toe walking or hand flapping, or a restrictive interest in Thomas the Train is so popular, something to that effect. So those are the two kind of overarching categories that one must qualify in, essentially, to meet a diagnosis for autism. the biggest difference in this DSM as opposed to others is that there is no longer a differentiation between the disorders that are on the spectrum, if you will. So things like Asperger's, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, childhood disintegrative disorder, those are no longer differentiated. It's all just autism spectrum disorder now.
Is that a good thing, do you think, or a bad thing?
That has been very controversial in the field. Controversial is.
I mean, people
It
go
depends.
by people go by labels.
They
you know,
do,
that's
they do.
the human person.
Exactly. And so from my perspective, and this is what I've gained professionally, is I think whatever is necessary to get a person the services they need, that's what we need to focus on. And if the label is X or Y or Z, to me, and this is again just me personally, this is not necessarily indicative of the field, but to me personally, I would say, okay, they have to have this label to get this service. If this service is what they really need, let's get them there. Now, of course, there's the flip side of the coin of, you know, there's a lot of people who identify with their diagnosis. In particular, and not to call anybody out by any means, but in particular, the Asperger's world, they very, very, very much identify with having Asperger's rather than kind of the autism spectrum. And so that was very controversial for them and still is controversial. They're having a really difficult time transitioning to a label, if you will, of autism spectrum disorder. Now again, the reason these diagnostic criteria changed were so that everyone who needs really, unfortunately, that label to get access to those services are being identified. And so there's great things coming from the changes, and then in a personal aspect, there's maybe some hesitation.
Who is the one that puts this all together and makes these changes and these determinations?
So the American Psychological Association is the one who writes the DSM. And on the panel for the autism change, I think there was, don't quote me on this, but I think the panel consisted of something like 16 experts within the field who were all very qualified, and they actually did what I thought was great is they reached out to the community and they said, you know, what should we be including? What should we be looking at differently? And there really was a lot of input from a general population into the changes that occurred. So I think they did a really good job, but like I said, it is a living document. It absolutely is guaranteed to change again. They change as the research happens, and there's so much research happening right now. So it's all but guaranteed that it will change again in the next edition of the DSM.
Now, you had mentioned when we were talking before that someone who has autism sometimes has a secondary disorder.
Absolutely, yes. So comorbidity is very prevalent in
How do you
autism.
spell that word? Jeez.
Comorbid is C-O-M-O-R-B-I-D.
Okay.
Right? Comorbid? I think.
Good.
Spelling might not be my strong suit. So yes, comorbidity is absolutely common. Some of the more common disorders would be epilepsy. So right now I think research shows just about 30% of persons diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder also have epilepsy, which is a huge percentage. I think overall right now the rate is almost 50%. I'm going to say it's
Wow.
like 46.1% or something like that, of persons diagnosed with ASD also have a comorbid diagnosis. Like I said, epilepsy is huge, sleep disorders, eating disorders, and not the traditional way we think of them, not bulimia or anorexia, things like that, but more restricted diets and sensitivity to foods, those types of things. Let's see, what else would be popular?
So when you're a young parent, okay, fairly new parent, and you're always concerned about your child, what are some of the things that might show up that they then need to bring it to the doctor's attention?
Yes.
And then what do they do after that?
That's a great question. And this is, the early intervention and the early identification piece is something I hold very near and dear. I worked in early intervention for about 4 years. And within the state of Connecticut, we identify that as being a part of the birth to 3 system, would be an early identification and an early intervention. So in terms of a new parent, particularly a first-time parent,
Yes.
When you think about how to identify when something's not right, what you need to know first is what is right. So my recommendation always to any parent, but especially a first-time parent, is educate yourself. Figure out what a developmental milestone is. What is it? Those are things that are naturally occurring, things that you progress through naturally within your life. So for instance, if we're talking about maybe a 2 to 4 month old, things that we want to see from a 2 to 4 month old are a focus on faces. You know, babies should start focusing on your face, start trying to imitate some of the facial expressions you make. You know, everybody goes up and ogles at a baby, and you want to see them start to react and smile along with you and try and do the things that your mouth is doing. That would be a reciprocal social interaction. Mm-hmm. And like we said, social interactions are a huge piece of the diagnostic criteria. Well, those are the very, very, very foundational skills that come with those social interactions. So you would want to see that start to develop. You want to see an attempt at some imitative skills, like I said, copying what your face is doing. You would want to start seeing some recognition of familiar adults. So when mom or dad walks in the room, you would want to see that the child, A, recognizes the sound of something happening, so you want to see them turn and mm-hmm. figure out where the sound is coming. And then when it is somebody they know, when it's mom, when it's dad, grandma, whomever, you want to see some sort of recognition that, oh, that's my person. And what we normally would label those as anticipatory gestures. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when mom comes over to pick the baby up, generally you'll see some sort of movement in the arms or something that lets them know, oh, here comes somebody to get me.
Right.
Those are some of the things that you definitely want to start seeing. Also, you want to start looking for things like motor coordination. So around the 4-month spot, you want to start seeing a child reaching for toys and sort of using that hand-eye coordination to figure out where that toy is and how to grab it. Some red flags that we might start looking for along those age lines are a lack of motor development. So a lack of being able to lift their head and hold themselves up simultaneously. Mm-hmm. Or if a loud sound happens and they don't turn to orient to that sound. Those are sort of things that you want to start keeping an eye on. Okay. Moving more towards the 6-month realm, you definitely want to see more of that imitation. So I always explain to my parents that imitation is one of the biggest foundational skills that a child can have, any learner can have. Mm-hmm. And I give the example of when I was probably about 24, 25 maybe, I was going to an airport that I regularly use, and the airport was all of a sudden under construction. And it was not well marked, and so I really was not sure where I was supposed to go. And so what did I do? I looked at what everybody else was doing.
Right.
I imitated what they were doing. That imitation skill that I used at 25 years old started way back at 2 months old. And so if you think about all these really, really, really basic core skills, they all build on development. And that's where our functioning comes from, our everyday functioning in adulthood. So particularly imitation is such a huge skill because that really is how the majority of how we learn. Mm-hmm. We imitate words, we imitate actions, we imitate everything. So around the 6th month, you really want to start seeing more of the child babbling back towards you. You know, you want to see some more babbling happening, some more sound development, those sorts of things. Maybe even some motor imitation type stuff. So copying your wave or something to that effect. Some red flags around that area would really be a lack of babbling. And I think that's really prevalent around the 6-month age, as 6 to 9 months typically, is if your baby is not playing with their voice, mm-hmm. That's probably something you would want to bring to attention. And in addition, here's one of those kind of stereotypical things we think of when we think autism is a lack of response to name. Mm-hmm. So I think eye contact and responding to name are 2 of the things that people identify with autism most. And here's where that would start to develop. So if between 6 and 9 months your child is not responding and looking towards you when you call their name, that would be a red flag. And that does not, and none of these red flags necessarily mean that there's any prevalence of, or any sign of autism. It's just something to be aware of, and certainly something to bring to your pediatrician's attention.
Now, we don't want parents to panic,
Exactly.
okay? And we also don't want you to think we must have done something wrong.
Never.
So someone may be born with autism,
Of
and
course.
there's another reason, not anything that you did wrong.
No, and what the research is telling us right now is that the development of autism is another twofold. So there is a genetic component, but there also is an environmental component. And at this point, we know that the two are working together. We just don't know how or where or why or when. But certainly it's not a parental deficit. And originally there was the idea of this kind of concept of the refrigerator mother.
What is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the refrigerator mother was the concept when, back in the 80s, when autism first really kind of started to come out into the limelight a little bit. Someone came up with the concept, who shall remain nameless, came up with the concept of mothers being cold to their children and not interacting with them and not giving them kind of the loving environment that they needed, and the term refrigerator mother was coined.
Okay, now
Yes.
it makes sense.
So it is not, autism is by no means a parental deficit. It is not at all. And anybody who still thinks that, I'm telling you, you're wrong.
Okay. Now, there's also been some controversy around whether you should get these shots for
Vaccines.
the vaccines
Yes,
for
I'm
your
very
child.
glad you brought that up. So let's rewind a little bit
Okay.
to the early 2000s and Jenny McCarthy. So for those of you who don't know who Jenny McCarthy is, she, bear with me, at one point was a Playboy playmate, and she then went on to host some TV shows on MTV and that sort of thing, and she had a child, and her child was initially diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. And so she and her pediatrician sort of came together, and she said, well, I started noticing these deficits and these changes within my child around the time that he got vaccinated, which is so common because a loss of skills is pretty typical for kids diagnosed with autism, and it's pretty typical that it happens around the same time where shots are prescribed. It's very much just a correlation. It's by no means causal.
It's a coincidence, people.
It is a coincidence. And so what happened was Jenny McCarthy and the popular media got together and they said, vaccines caused my child's autism. And in fairness, it kind of made sense. And so all of this pseudo research was done. And what we had was an explosion of this vaccination almost crisis, where people stopped vaccinating their children. They were terrified of vaccines and still are. However, this year what we had was an enormous study conducted which completely discredited the vaccination theory altogether. There is no link, none whatsoever, between a diagnosis of autism and vaccinating your children. Rather, what we saw was about a 5-year span where we had 100,000 infants die of typhoid fever because people stopped vaccinating their children. So yeah, it was, and still is. I mean, there was a significant amount of damage done by that fallacy that came out. And actually the researcher, and I use that term lightly, who supported this claim admitted that they falsified all of the data. So there is absolutely no credible link between vaccinating your child and autism.
As a matter of fact, it's probably more dangerous not to get your children vaccinated. So please don't let what you've read and heard keep you from doing that.
Right. And I think that brings up another really important point, especially in today's world of technology and the internet and those sorts of things. There is so much information available. I mean, there just is an enormous amount of information available, and not much of it is credible. You have to be so careful when parents or anybody is researching anything.
Is it best to go to supportive organizations.
That's exactly what I was
And
going
get
to
the
suggest.
information from there rather than Wikipedia. I heard someone on the radio recently saying, do not go to Wikipedia when you want to diagnose your medical problem,
Yeah.
because most of what you read there is not true.
That's exactly true. Wikipedia is actually a website where anyone can post anything, so that's dangerous in and of itself. But that is true of the internet as a whole as well. As anybody can post anything on the internet. It doesn't have to be true, and there is a lot of false information. So absolutely, 100%, my recommendation would be to go to websites that are credible, like Autism Speaks, or different schools' websites, those sorts of things, universities' websites. Even one thing I will endorse in terms of the general internet is something like Google Scholar, where they're credible articles that you can go read, and it's the real research that's happening that you can go read. But certainly I would start in a place like Autism Speaks, something that is monitored, and the things that are put on there are very much accurate before they're ever even thought to be placed within their domain. It's so important.
Thank heavens we have those sites, and Kristen's going to be joining us on the second half. She's going to be joining the two of us, and she's from Autism Speaks. Let's talk a little bit about the government.
Okay, let's talk about the government.
Let's get a little into it here.
Yes. So, in terms of autism legislation, what we see nationally, we'll talk federal first. So the federal government, as of today, has an Autism Act which designates $231 million per year for things like education, research, prevalence tracking, early intervention, early diagnoses, those sorts of things. All of that money goes towards those government agencies who do all of that work. Great, wonderful. Problem is that is set to run out in September of this year. So what we have are 18 national organizations, such as Autism Speaks, who are working together with the federal government in keeping that legislation active, and as well as they really want to place the focus on more research and services for adults, because there's a lot of people who feel as though adults are kind of falling by the wayside in terms of resources being allocated to them and those sorts of things, because early intervention is such a huge focus right now. So that is kind of being reallocated and looked at right now, and progress is certainly being made on it. It is scheduled to end in September, but I don't see it ending by any means. Just some changes will happen, certainly. Now, more locally in the state of Connecticut, we've had a huge growth in Connecticut here. In 2009, the governor signed a bill which mandated private insurance companies fund up to $50,000 of behavioral treatment for children with autism. And kind of as your age increases, that number goes down a little bit, which coordinates perfectly with the research, because the research does say kind of to front load intervention, to put the majority of the hours and money and those sorts of things into early intervention, and then it's appropriate to taper off as the learner gets older, because early intervention should be so successful. So that was a huge, huge development in our state, and we were the 5th state to sign autism legislation, which was wonderful. So we were on the front of that, and more have since, and that was great. Now that we have Obamacare, Obamacare has jumped on the bandwagon as well, which is wonderful to hear. And so what Obamacare has now done is taken all of those kind of other insurances who are not so private, and Obamacare has, in addition, kind of mandated legislation for autism as well. And so it's almost the same, actually better, in that there is no cap. So there's no lifetime cap, and there's no per anna cap in terms of how much money can be allocated. It's more need-based, which is exactly what we want to see.
Oh, that's great.
It is great, it is. And so learners now, and persons diagnosed now with autism who are accessing healthcare under Obamacare can get behavioral treatment. And Obamacare also has things like rehabilitative services, a variety of different services for learners with autism, but I think the main focus is behavioral treatment because it is, empirically validated and evidence-based and those sorts of things. And so I actually, unfortunately, have to give Obama kudos on that one, even though I'm sure he didn't really have anything to do with it. But I thought that was great. I certainly commend the idea, and we'll see how it plays out, I suppose.
Well, that's good news.
Yes.
And it's a great spot for us to take a short break. And when we come back, Kristen is going to be joining us. So stay with us.
Can you help me with this? My new
Okay.
dad teaches me all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
He helps me with homework.
That would be 3.6795.
Thanks.
Yep.
He helps me with my decision making.
I wouldn't use this one. Ever.
And he's even teaching me how to drive.
And that's why cars have bumpers.
I'm learning so much.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are. When some people struggle with their mortgage payments, they become frozen, petrified. Not knowing what to do, they do nothing. But the people who take action are far more likely to get the most positive outcome. Making home affordable is a free government program. Call now to talk one-on-one with a housing expert about the options that are right for you. Real help, real answers, right now.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
Up, college is hard. Down, those books are heavy.
My sport is football, but my passion is education.
Right up
So every year I take promising high schoolers on a college tour
Lights there, darts there.
to show them that higher education means a brighter future. My name is Nnamdi Asamoah. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
You can be a reader, tutor, or mentor too. Take the pledge at liveunited.org/volunteer.
Do you wear this?
And so we're back, and there was that wonderful dog that we love every week. That's because he's half Samoyed, and I have a Samoyed, or a Samoyed, actually, to say that correctly, and they're the best dog in the world. So we are here today talking about autism, and Meghan Brahm has been talking with us and filling us in on a lot of information. She has another point to make in a minute, but I want to introduce you to Kristen. Now, Kristen, I'm going to try to say this right. Anbari. Okay. And she's with the Southeastern Connecticut Community Outreach. She's the chair and the parent volunteer.
For Autism Speaks.
For Autism Speaks, that's right. And so you were in the other room while we were doing the first half. And tell us real quickly why you were in the other room.
Why I was in the other room?
Why were you in the other room?
Well, you happen to see a little of my autism and why I do what I do. There was a little glitch in our system tonight, so my son had to come here, and he doesn't like changes. He doesn't like anything new. So he was absolutely, completely scared of this studio, which is lovely.
Poor little guy. Oh, gosh.
Fortunately, he likes bathrooms.
Yes.
So not everybody likes Thomas the Train. Some like toilets. I see a future in it, so don't worry.
Oh, very good. All right.
And right now they're over at Benny's, so thank you, Benny's.
Right next door.
Yeah,
almost.
so everything is all worked out.
Everything's
so thanks
all under
for,
control.
changing the schedule around a little bit.
Oh, no problem, no problem. Like I said, this is your show tonight, okay? And so we're going to
Don't say that.
So we're gonna talk a little bit more with you in a second. But Meghan had another point she wanted to make.
I did. I digressed when we started talking about screening. So one of the points I want to make is that so often I have clients who come in and they say, I always had a gut feeling there wasn't something right. I always knew, and Kristen can attest to this. And I was always told, oh, he'll grow out of it, she'll grow out of it, it's just a phase, those sorts of things. My biggest recommendation to parents is go with your gut. Always, always, always go with your gut. If you know something's not right, if you feel something's not right, bear with me. Forget what your pediatrician says. Forget what your friend who's the doctor says. Go with your gut. Autism Speaks has a really great toolkit on their website that you can access that actually allows you to screen your child on your own. And so the autism-specific screening tool is called the MChat. And that it's a really easy, it takes 2 minutes to fill out. It's yes or no answers. And it tells you, does your child have red flags for autism? And again, not to make anybody panic, these are just red flags. They're just things that say.
And it's something you can physically bring to your physician and
Exactly.
say, listen, these are my concerns.
Exactly. And I'm very valid in my concerns. So my suggestion would be take it upon yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you. You are the parent, and you have every right to do whatever you need to do to get your child what they need, and go with your gut. So take advantage of the screening tools, take advantage of the kits that Autism Speaks has on their website, and just do it.
And we were talking a little bit about the websites where you should go and where you shouldn't go for information. And I wanted to do a little research and see what your website was like. And autismspeaks.org, it has so much information.
Yes. Megan said exactly why I do what I do. And that is what I do. I try and steer people into the right direction on the website, tell them what the website has to offer. There are toolkits on there. Maggie, there's also a video glossary where it will show, think about, I always think like the person that doesn't speak English, how is that going to help the MChat? Or for me, it was denial. And this shows a typical whatever stage, say 1 month old, and a 1 month old with autism. All right, maybe not 1 month old, but you know what I mean, 12 month old, at different stages of life. And for me, it was a real wow, that's what my kid is doing, and that is what my other kid is not doing. So it was a real eye opener. So
now they're twins,
absolutely,
right?
Go with your gut. Yes.
So you have twins, a little girl and a little boy,
and one on the spectrum.
So you did have that opportunity right in front of you of seeing a difference. And it wasn't
it's
just
a curse.
and you had to say it's not just because he's a boy,
Well,
and she's a
we
girl.
were told that. Absolutely. And you'd be surprised how many people I talk to that say that. And thank goodness that we didn't have the MChat on the website. Well, actually, I didn't know about this website before we were diagnosed. We were just lucky we're two intelligent parents that were able to take it a step further. But yeah, we were definitely, he's just a boy, or the kids typically lose their words when they get to different stages, or everything. And then it was finally time
I think the it's a boy thing is a really crucial point to make, because autism is nearly 5 times more prevalent in males than it is females. And it is true that males develop slower, but not that much slower. And so the excuse of boys will be boys, or he'll grow into it, or he's just a boy and he's developing slower, it's just not acceptable.
And it is true they lose words as they're gaining room for new ones. When the new ones don't come, that's a flag.
Right.
Like Maggie said, you always go with your gut.
And I noticed that as you're talking about this, you use the word we, because it's the whole family that is affected by...
And Maggie's part of my family.
Yes.
Actually.
I'm an adopted member.
Talk about the glitch in the system. So Maggie was actually, my son Austin was Maggie's very first client.
Oh, wow.
And she was one of our very first early interventionists. And she had a whole other path for life picked out for herself. And now my Maggie, this is such a proud moment. She's in Ireland getting her dissertation as an autism specialist. And she'll always be a specialist in my heart. But I mean, we really have taken her on in the family.
So Megan, this made a difference in your life? You took a different path than you originally
I
planned?
absolutely did. I started my job where I met Kristen in Austin thinking I was going to be a school psychologist. And that did not work. I met Austin and I saw all of the things that were happening with him in his life. And at the time I was spending 25 hours a week with Kristen in their home, doing a very intense intervention, and realized this is where I belonged. And to this day, actually when I started with Austin, he didn't speak at all. He was 18 months old?
Yeah,
19 months?
18.
Yeah, didn't speak at all. Today, I can FaceTime and have conversations with him about his day at school.
Oh.
And
And
it's
science.
amazing. And science projects, and bathrooms.
Yeah, they go on for hours about toilets. Don't think my son's the only one. I'm kidding.
Well, that's a great story. It shows, so you're a part of the we.
Yes.
So it takes
Proudly.
a family.
It
You know,
does.
when they say that it takes a village to raise a child, it really kind of does. But initially, it's that family unit that has to
Absolutely.
come together and recognize there's something not quite right here and we need help.
Because you also lose a lot of friends and family along the journey. So they're not pointing things out to you anymore. So it's really important to keep the ones that you have in your life.
And the
The
supportive
support
ones.
system,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's not easy, is it?
I love you, Maggie.
And we,
Thank you.
and we got it on tape. So you can look at it anytime you want to. So you've been very active in the organization. You became
I have.
active.
Yes, so we were diagnosed early on. So at 12 months, my son stopped smiling. He stopped talking. He used to say dance. I'll never forget. He'd say dance, and he lost it all. He turned into almost a different person. He would open and close the cabinets in the kitchen over and over and over, and we didn't know it was happening, and we saw our physician, and we did get a lot of it's a boy, he'll grow out of it, we'll keep an eye on it. And then I believed him and my husband didn't. So thank God my husband didn't, and he kept pushing for an evaluation. However, evaluations, you could wait years to get a diagnosis. So we were very fortunate that we found a study through Yale where, so now here's the fun part of it. You could wait a year and a half, whereas we actually had Hasbro in Rhode Island call us a year and a half later to schedule our evaluation after we have already been diagnosed, met Maggie, and we're on a whole other path. I almost fell over when they called. Yale, we waited a few months to get in their eye tracking study, and they paid us a $50 Target gift card. And we also had the most extensive evaluation with yearly follow-ups. We were there for 3 days, and all the help that we could ever ask for quickly. So that's one thing a lot of people don't know about too. If you can't just wait for your appointment to come around, you have to actively pursue it. And I was a nurse practitioner. My husband is an orthopedic surgeon. And we went to Yale, and they said, okay, so here's some resources. And they were all in New Haven and Hartford. Okay, I don't live there. I live in the beautiful southeastern Connecticut because I wanted to, because I chose to live here. The school systems, the white picket fence. Never thought of looking for autism resources before moving here. Who would?
No, of course
So,
not.
yeah, we don't have a lot. We're getting better, but we don't have a lot. So, after diagnosis, when they couldn't steer me in the right direction, I decided to kind of turn that anger into something positive. I reached out to all of the autism organizations, national, local, and they all told me to find a support group, and not one could tell me where to find one in my area, but just saying. Autism Speaks wrote me back, and they said that I could volunteer as little or as much time as I wanted, and please, feel free to come and join us in Hartford. And started trekking down there for the meetings, but what I did find through that was an amazing support system of power mamas, all affected one way or another by autism. I got a lot of tips and a lot of life lessons, and pretty much how to bring a lot of what they're doing here. So that is why I started things here. Sorry, I got thrown off just by the walk by there.
Oh, that's okay. That's just Frank.
I know. But so I try to copy a lot of what they did here. So I hold a lot of information tables around the area. You'll see me at all the home shows. You'll see me everywhere. And it's really a lot of just telling people where they can find the information, helping them navigate through the website, answering any of their questions. Sometimes it's just people coming over and saying, my doctor said this, what do you think? Just being a support system. Like you both said, there's a wealth of information online, but these toolkits are amazing. They have toolkits that are to help your child sleep better, help with constipation. I mean, step-by-step toolkits with visuals, toolkits for family members, for friends. And you can go online, you can order them, they will be sent to you free, with resources in the back that I helped put in there for our area. So we have resources in there. And if you can't wait to have it sent, you can download them for free as well and print them right off your printer, and wealth of information.
So we've actually come quite a ways.
I think we have.
Since
been.
I know we
think
were
I'm very
talking
lucky.
about the 80s.
Yeah.
And when this first came to light, and people started noticing that there's something going on,
Right.
and it's more than one or two children.
Right.
So
Just since 2009, there's been over 11,000 studies concentrating on autism just in the US. Whereas the 5 years previous to that, there was not even half of that many studies. So there really is a huge, huge focus right now.
well, I saw a statistic that said, and where is it? It's on the next page. Autism affects 1 in 68 children, 1 in 42 boys.
Yeah.
Now that's pretty darn common.
It is.
Does anybody know why there's been such an increase? Is it just because we're recognizing it, or is there, such as the environmental factors,
Exactly.
more chemicals and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so there's so many things that influence the rates increase at this point. Things like we're getting better at diagnosing. So that whole DSM change that we talked about initially, that was all meant to better diagnose. And it was all meant to access people who really require that diagnosis, like we talked about. In addition, one of the things that we're starting to see within the research is that autism is becoming increasingly more popular in older parents. And the trend of parenting in the world today is people are having kids older. And
Right.
so initially we thought there was no kind of biological clock for a father, if you will, but there was a very recent study that just came out saying that older fathers have a hugely increased risk of having children with autism, and they do have a biological clock, which is 35 as well as it is in women. There's also things like environmental insults that are increasing, absolutely. In terms of the differentiation between males and females, there's actually, Kristen mentioned Yale. Yale has an enormous child study center, which is very autism centered, and they are wonderful. And what they're doing right now is a lot of genetic testing, and they are, I don't want to speak for them, but they are looking very closely as to why it is so much more prevalent in boys as opposed to girls. And birdies chirp and tell me they're making progress. So hopefully we'll have some sort of understanding relatively soon in terms of that. But there are so many factors that go into why autism is increasing, and it's impossible to pinpoint one at this point.
And progress is good. You know, it's slow, but it needs to be
there.
done.
It is.
And in the meantime, money needs to be raised.
Exactly.
So you just had a fundraiser, the Walk in Hartford.
I'm sorry.
She phased out, folks.
No,
That's
I'm
okay.
getting texts
No.
from the babysitter out there.
Okay, they're over in Benny's.
Who's also Maggie's sister. I just want to mention. It's a family affair here today.
Okay.
Yes, they had a walk in Hartford, and a couple weeks before that, they had a walk in, oh gosh, what can I think
Waterbury.
of? Waterbury, thank you. And let's see, right now they have over $300,000 raised to date, like on Sunday. That's what it was. And so it'll obviously increase with more donations coming in and everything. And they had about 7,500 people show up.
That's really great.
Wow,
Yeah,
that is
so
amazing.
that's why it's at the big Rensselaer's Field. They have a lot.
7,500 people.
Yeah, now we don't
Wow.
have that many for our walk, but I think our walk is pretty impressive as well. So we are on our third year.
Excellent.
And last year we had 2,500 people, over
That's
2,500. It blew my mind. I thought it'd just be
Yeah.
Maggie and me, really. And no, there's quite a few of us
And I
out
think
there.
I saw you shortly after that walk. And
Yes.
you were walking around with
Yes, we
stars
have
in
a-
your eyes. You were going, wow, I can't believe so many people came out.
I
Wow,
really
wow.
couldn't believe it. I was like, I really thought that it wasn't. I was pleasantly shocked. We also raised a lot of money.
So tell me, what is the date that we want people to write down for this year to help raise money?
Well, I hope I'm correct.
Okay.
It is October 25th, which is a Saturday. Registration is at 9 a.m. The walk starts at 10. There's a full resource fair there so that parents and community members can go to different agencies and see what is in our area, which is quite a few. We had, I think like 30 different resources come out
that's
for the
great.
first walk.
That's a
Yeah,
huge
so
That's
I
great.
mean that was
Yeah.
amazing. Maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't know anymore. We have it's 100% for a sponsorship thing. It's free for families. We have a lot of activities. Steve Elsey, all of our friends.
Oh, yeah.
We're all friends with Steve Elsey.
Yes.
He comes out, puts on a great show. We have, since it's around Halloween, we have a pumpkin field and a haystack, and makes great photo ops. And
How fun.
yeah, we have a really good time, and it's at the beautiful Camp Harkness in Waterford. And we have lucked out with weather. It's been just wonderful. My good friend Alicia Ziegler is the walk chair this year, so she's got some great things going on. They've held their first meeting to get the fundraising started and rebook everything, and
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody
pretty
wants
exciting.
to know more about it,
Well, you could go to autismspeaks.org and find a walk that way, or you could go to www.walknow4autismspeaks.org/SECT.
but you can get there from
You could
autismspeaks.org.
Google it.
Or Google it.
It's the
yeah.
first thing.
Yeah.
Just look up my name, and it's all over. Just
And
Google.
there's
So
Lauren.
no excuse. You can
Lauren
find it.
Amendola is
That's
going to
right.
be. She's going to be
She's our
joining us
director.
before this event. We're gonna have you come back in October.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay, and we'll talk some more.
Lauren's
You've
a
got all
great
this
friend.
practice in now, so
I promise to have childcare like secure.
hey, it happens, you
School
know.
time, just saying. That's when I could really get out.
So I've just got a few minutes left, and first of all, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
and
you
giving
for
us
having us.
all of this information. And we've got a couple of announcements. There's a lot of good causes in the area. Coming up on Wednesday, July 9th from 6:30 to 10 p.m., there'll be a night of fun and support for Safe Futures. Now, they've been on our show before. The Pathway to a Safe Future Endowment Fund at the Connecticut Tigers Dodge Stadium, which is a great thing. That's a joint effort with the Southeastern Connecticut Women's Network, which I'm a member. And if you want to know, the tickets are $8, and you can email Pamela_GRACEY, Gracie, at us.aflac.com. Or you can just contact Safe Futures and they'll tell you about it too. Then we have another event, which is Sales Up for Cancer Annual Regatta Weekend. Now this sounds like fun.
Oh, it is.
It's June 21st and June 22nd, Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday, there's a regatta from Fisher's Island for sailors in all classes, and a picnic for the non-racer. And also the Sunshine Kids are going to be on the schooner Argia watching the race, which will be really cool for them. And on Sunday, there is a CAMX, which is the Complementary Alternative Medicine Expo, and the Hangover Blues event, okay? So it's Sundays, you'll be hungover, okay. Free to the public with prizes, raffles, demos, massages, Reiki, and more. It'll be a lot of fun. So you can go to this website, which is www.su4c.org. If Chris and Frank can bring it up, that'll be great. That's SU, there it is for you, okay, and get more information. Now remember, we're always looking for ideas for people to bring on the show. Also, any announcements of events that are going on for a good cause, nonprofits, charitable organizations, please let us know. You can email us at fromthiscornertv@gmail.com. He's right on it. And also you can go to our website, which will tell you the kind of shows that we've got coming up. We have things from, wellness, health and wellness, to karate as a way for children to learn focus and discipline, and belly dancing. That's going to be fun.
I used to take belly dancing lessons.
I would love to take I took one lesson and threw my back out. What can I say? I'm out of shape. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much. It was a great show. And please join us again next week, same time, same place. Thank you so much. Yay.